Hey everyone, welcome to this deep dive, and this one is specifically tailored for you.
Oh,
Yeah, you sent over some really interesting stuff on risk management from Risk Management Learn XYZ. It's a quite dense article, but
it's
there's
like
some really interesting stuff in here.
it's very comprehensive.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I'm excited to jump in.
It's like they're trying to give us a whole toolkit for managing risk. It's not just defining it, which I think is what you're looking for, right?
Yeah, and I think a lot of people listening might be like, okay, toolkit, why do I need a toolkit for risk management? That sounds like a Fortune 500 thing.
Yeah, it's a common misconception, but risk is everywhere.
Right.
Think about it this way. Every decision we make involves some element of risk.
Oh, okay.
Even choosing, what to eat for breakfast.
Okay, so you're saying like, my breakfast burrito is a risk management scenario.
Well, in a way, yeah. What if that burrito gives you, heartburn later? You chose the quick and tasty option, but maybe there's a downside. Risk management is about recognizing those potential downsides.
Right.
And figuring out how to minimize them while maximizing the positives. It's about being strategic about it.
So it's not just about avoiding risk altogether.
Exactly. The article really stresses that sometimes the best approach is to avoid risk completely, but a lot of times it's about figuring out how to mitigate it.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could apply to way more than just business decisions, right?
Absolutely.
But where do we even begin? How do we spot these risks? They're like ninjas hiding in the shadows.
Well, the article outlines a whole bunch of different methods for identifying risks.
Okay.
And what's interesting is they emphasize how important it is to have a lot of different perspectives.
Oh, interesting.
So brainstorming with a group of people who have different backgrounds, different experiences can help uncover blind spots, things that we might have missed on our own.
So it's kind of like you have your risk spotting team,
Exactly.
each person with their own unique lens.
Exactly. And it's not just brainstorming. They talk about using historical data,
Yeah.
conducting SWOT analyses,
Yeah.
even consulting with experts,
Mm.
really leaving no stone unturned.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like we're like detectives here, right?
Yeah.
Gathering clues,
Yes.
analyzing evidence,
Absolutely.
trying to predict the future.
Yeah.
So how do we predict the future of risk?
Right. Well, they actually talk about this thing called scenario analysis.
Well,
This is where you create these hypothetical situations like, what if this happens or what if that happens? And then you think through
oh,
how you
interesting.
respond.
So it's kind of like we're doing a mental rehearsal
Exactly.
for potential risks.
Exactly. And that can be incredibly valuable because it helps you anticipate potential challenges
Right.
and then develop strategies to deal with them before
Yeah.
they even arise.
So we've identified, we've brainstormed, we've thought of all these different risks, right?
Right.
How do we know which ones to really take seriously? I mean, some risks are probably pretty small, right?
And that's where risk assessment comes in. This is where we put on our analytical hats.
Right.
And we start evaluating each risk
Okay.
based on how likely it is to happen and the impact it would have if it did. So, we're trying to figure out.
So a risk ranking system, 5
Yeah.
stars, this is a bad one. 2 stars, we're probably okay.
Yeah, that's a great way to visualize it. They talk about using a risk matrix to help with this.
Okay.
So you plot each risk on a grid based on its likelihood and impact. And then you can see, okay, these are the ones that really need our attention.
This is making me think about how I organize my to-do list.
Right.
I'm always thinking about urgency and importance, and it sounds like this is kind of that same thing.
Absolutely. And the article even mentions that risk management should be integrated into your overall planning process.
So it's not just a separate thing you do, it's woven into...
It should be part of everything.
Yeah. When you're setting goals, developing strategies, you should be thinking about the potential risks from the beginning.
Wow. Okay. This is all making a lot of sense.
Good.
I have to admit, though, this is all starting to feel a little bit overwhelming.
I understand.
I'm constantly looking over my shoulder.
But remember, risk management is not about living in fear.
Right.
It's about being prepared,
Yeah.
informed, so you can make the best decisions possible, even when there's uncertainty.
Okay. That makes me feel better.
Good.
So let's say we've identified these risks, we've assessed them.
Right?
How do we actually fight them?
That's a great question. The article outlines 4 main risk mitigation strategies:
Okay.
avoidance, reduction, transfer, and acceptance.
Okay, so let's break those down. Avoidance, that sounds pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
If something is too risky, just don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes the best approach is to just avoid the risk altogether, if you can.
Right.
Of course, you can't always do that.
Right, so what about reduction?
So risk reduction is about taking steps to minimize either the likelihood of the risk happening
Right.
or the severity of the impact if it does.
Okay.
So, things like implementing safety measures,
Yeah.
improving processes,
Right.
diversifying your investments.
So you're not eliminating it. You're just trying to, like, make it less bad.
Exactly. But even with all those things in place, there might still be some residual risk that you just can't get rid of. And that's where risk transfer comes in.
Okay, risk transfer, what is that?
Think insurance.
Okay.
That's a classic example of risk transfer.
Got it.
You're basically shifting the financial burden
Okay.
of a potential loss onto a third party.
Okay, so, like, if my house burns down,
Exactly.
I don't have to bear the full cost because my insurance company will cover it.
Right. Risk transfer can be a powerful tool for managing those risks that could cause, like, significant financial damage.
Okay.
And then finally, there's risk acceptance. Acceptance. So just, like, throw up our hands and say, whatever happens, happens.
Not exactly. Risk acceptance is more about making a conscious decision
Okay.
to accept a certain level of risk.
Got it?
Usually it's because the cost of trying to mitigate that risk
Right.
is greater than the potential benefit.
So it's like a calculated decision, not just giving up.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about weighing the pros and cons and choosing the best course of action, even if it means accepting some risk.
This is really helpful. I feel like we're building this risk management toolkit, and now we have these different weapons.
I like that analogy.
I know, right?
No.
But is there an order? Like, should we try to avoid it first and then reduce it? How do we use these different tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. The article doesn't give a strict order, but they do emphasize that avoidance should be the first thing you consider.
Okay.
If you can avoid the risk completely, that's often the best approach.
Yeah, why take on the risk if you don't have to?
Exactly. But if you can't avoid it, then you move on to reduction strategies.
Nope.
And if there's still some residual risk that's just not acceptable, then you consider transfer or acceptance.
So we've got all this information, all these strategies. Where do we keep all this? Do we just keep it in our heads?
Well, that's where the risk register comes in. They describe it as a centralized document for tracking and documenting all the risks that you've identified.
Okay, so it's like the superhero headquarters for managing risk.
I love that.
Tell me more. What is a risk register?
Think of it like a master spreadsheet
Okay.
or a database. It includes the risk description, its assessment, who's responsible for managing it, the response strategies that you've chosen, those important risk triggers, and any updates on the status of that risk.
So if I need to know anything about a specific risk, I just go to the risk register.
Exactly. It keeps everyone on the same page, promotes transparency, and makes collaboration so much easier.
So this risk register is kind of like our risk encyclopedia.
I like it.
It's amazing. But this is a lot of information. For like bigger organizations, this could get really complex, right?
Yeah. Right. And luckily, there are a lot of what they call enterprise risk management or ERM
Oh, yeah.
software solutions out there that can
Right.
help. But technology, it can be a blessing and a curse. We don't want to introduce more risk, right?
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Cybersecurity risks are definitely something to keep in mind when you're implementing any kind of new technology.
Right.
But when chosen carefully, ERM software can be incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
It helps centralize information, automate tasks, and provide like real-time insights into your risk landscape.
It's like having a digital command center for all things risk.
Exactly.
I'm already feeling more empowered just thinking about it. This whole risk management thing is starting to feel a little less like a burden and more like a superpower.
That's the spirit. Remember, risk management is not about eliminating risk altogether.
Right.
It's about understanding it, embracing it, and using it to your advantage.
Okay.
With the right tools and strategies,
Right.
you can actually turn potential threats into opportunities for growth and innovation. This is fantastic. We've covered a lot of ground. We talked about identifying risks, assessing them, coming up with strategies to mitigate them.
Yes.
But we're not done yet, right?
Not even close.
There's still more to this risk management world, so stay tuned, because when we come back, we'll be diving deeper into some of those more advanced concepts. Things like strategic risk management and the human element.
Absolutely. We'll be back after a quick break to delve into those fascinating areas.
All right, we'll be right back. Okay, so we're back, and I'm ready to talk about these strategic risks.
Yeah, let's dive into that.
They feel kind of big and scary. Like, how do we wrap our heads around something that's so, like, massive and complex.
Well, it helps to understand what makes strategic risks different from those everyday risks we talked about earlier. Strategic risks are those that could really impact your long-term goals and objectives.
Oh, okay.
They could derail everything.
So it's not
that-
just like tripping over a rock. It's like an avalanche that's going to wipe out the whole path.
Exactly. Think about like big shifts in your industry, new technologies that come out of nowhere, political instability, even climate change. These are the things that could really change the game.
Okay, I'm starting to see the difference. But how can we predict these kinds of things? It feels like we need a crystal ball.
It does feel that way, but the article gives us some guidance. They emphasize continuous monitoring and environmental scanning.
So we're like constantly on the lookout.
Yeah, we need to be gathering information, analyzing trends, looking for those early warning signs.
So it's not enough to just like do a risk assessment once a year and then just forget about it.
No, definitely not. Strategic risks are always evolving, so we have to stay ahead of the curve. This could mean like subscribing to industry publications, going to conferences, talking to experts, even just like using social media to see what's trending.
So we're like risk management detectives.
Exactly.
We're always looking for clues.
Yes, and remember scenario planning. We talked about that a little bit earlier. By creating those what-if scenarios and thinking through how we would respond, we can be better prepared.
So it's not just about like predicting the future perfectly.
Right.
But it's more like being prepared for all these different possibilities.
Exactly. And that leads us to another really crucial aspect of managing strategic risks, and that's flexibility and adaptability.
Okay, so we need to be able to change course if we need to.
Right. Agile, able to pivot when things shift.
Yeah.
The article actually uses this term, dynamic capabilities.
Oh, fancy.
It means being able to sense, seize, and reconfigure resources so that you can stay competitive.
This is making me think about those companies that like totally thrived during the pandemic.
Yes.
They were able to like quickly shift to remote work. They changed their business models.
They were ready.
And they found ways
That's
to
it.
like connect with their customers in totally new ways.
Those are great examples of organizations that have strong dynamic capabilities. They were able to weather the storm because they were adaptable, they were innovative.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you saw those companies that were slow to react, clung to the old ways of doing things. They really struggled.
Like adapt or die, right?
Yeah, pretty
Right.
much. And that's especially true in today's world. Things are changing so fast.
Absolutely.
Strategic risk management is not just about avoiding threats, it's also about being ready to seize opportunities when they pop up.
I like that. Okay, so this is feeling less overwhelming.
Yeah.
It's not about being a fortune teller. It's about being informed and flexible and proactive.
Yeah.
But I'm still kind of curious how all of this connects back to the risk register.
Right.
You know, that master document we talked about.
Mhm.
How do we use it for these big picture strategic risks?
Great question. Just like with any other risk, we need to document those strategic risks in the register, their descriptions, assessments, ownership, potential responses. But with strategic risks, it's even more important to link them to our organizational objectives and our overall strategy.
So we're not just listing these risks randomly. We're thinking about how they could affect our goals.
Exactly. We want to understand how those risks could derail our progress. And by linking them to our objectives, we can make sure our risk mitigation strategies are actually aligned with where we want to go.
Okay, I see the connection now. The risk register, it's not just a to-do list of problems. It's a tool to make strategic decisions.
Exactly. And by regularly reviewing and updating it, we can make sure it's always relevant and reflects the current situation. For example, let's say one of your organization's objectives is to expand into a new market.
Go ahead.
You would want to identify the strategic risks that come with that expansion. Things like regulations, competitors, economic instability in that new market.
Right, those are all things that could really affect our success.
Absolutely. You document those risks in the register, assess how likely they are and what their impact could be, assign someone to be responsible for managing them, and develop some response strategies.
And those strategies would need to fit with our overall expansion plan, right?
Exactly. For instance, if your risk assessment shows that there's a high chance of running into regulatory challenges, your response strategy might be to engage with the local authorities early on, build those relationships, make sure you're complying with all the rules, or it might mean adjusting your timeline or the scope of your expansion to minimize potential problems.
So the risk register, it's like a roadmap that helps us get where we want to go safely.
I love that. It's a guide to help us anticipate challenges, make good decisions, and stay on track, even when things get bumpy.
Yeah.
It's especially valuable when we're dealing with strategic risks because those are often so complex and have so many different facets.
This has been really helpful. I'm starting to see how strategic risk management isn't just about avoiding bad stuff. It's about being proactive and adaptable and strategic in our decisions.
Yes,
It's about turning those potential roadblocks into, like, stepping stones.
absolutely.
This is making me feel way more confident. But I'm curious about one more thing. Earlier, you mentioned that sometimes risks can actually lead to opportunities. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, that's a key concept in strategic risk management. We tend to focus on the negative impacts of risk,
Yeah.
but it's important to recognize that risk can also present opportunities, maybe for growth or innovation.
So it's not just about defense. Sometimes we can go on offense.
Exactly. Sometimes taking calculated risks can lead to huge rewards. Think of it this way. If you never leave your comfort zone, you'll never discover anything new.
I like that. Can you give me some examples of how this works in the real world?
Sure. One example is Tesla. When they first started, a lot of people thought electric cars were a risky bet. There were concerns about battery life, where you could charge them, whether people would actually buy them.
Yeah, I remember that.
It seemed like a pretty niche market.
Right, and it seemed pretty risky. I agree.
But Tesla saw an opportunity in that risk. They knew that people wanted more sustainable transportation options, and they were willing to bet on the future of electric vehicles. They put a ton of money into research and development, built charging stations all over the place, and they created cars that were not only good for the environment, but also looked great and performed well.
And now they're leading the electric car revolution.
Exactly. By embracing those risks, they tapped into a whole new market, created a whole new industry, and their success has pushed a lot of other car companies to do the same.
It's like those risks were like hidden treasures just waiting to be discovered.
I like that. Another example is the rise of online shopping.
E-commerce.
Yes. When it first started, a lot of traditional retailers were scared to embrace it.
Yeah, it was a huge change.
They saw it as a threat to their physical stores and didn't want to invest in the technology they needed.
Right, it required a lot of changes in investment.
But some retailers, like Amazon, they saw the potential.
Amazon again.
Right. They recognized that e-commerce could reach way more people, it was more convenient, and it could create new ways to make money.
And now look at them, an e-commerce giant.
Right. By embracing those risks, they capitalized on a growing market and became a world leader.
These examples are so cool. They show that risks can be like stepping stones to success as long as we're willing to take chances and be innovative.
Absolutely. And remember, this isn't just about big companies and new technologies. These principles apply to everything. Starting a business, changing careers, even just deciding where to invest your money. Understanding and managing risk can help you find new opportunities and reach your goals.
This is a great point. I'm starting to see risks in a whole new light. Instead of being afraid, I'm actually kind of excited about the possibilities.
Yeah.
But I'm also realizing that risk management is more complicated than I thought.
Yeah.
It's not just about avoiding bad stuff. It's about being strategic and adaptable and embracing the risks that could lead to big breakthroughs.
That's it. Risk management is not one size fits all. It's about building your own toolkit and then using those tools wisely in different situations. It's about understanding your own risk tolerance, your goals, and what's happening around you.
This is all really valuable. I'm feeling a lot more prepared to deal with those risks now that I have this new knowledge.
I'm glad to hear it.
But there's one more thing I'm curious about. We talked about the human element before. How do our own biases, like how we think and behave, affect our risk management decisions?
That's a fantastic question. And that's exactly what we'll explore in the last part of our deep dive.
Okay.
The fascinating world of behavioral risk management and how our own psychology can influence our choices.
All right, so let's dig into this human element of risk management.
This is where things get really interesting. We've talked about all these tools and strategies,
Sure.
but in the end, it's people making the decisions.
And people aren't always like perfectly rational.
Right.
We have emotions, biases, all these mental shortcuts that can affect our judgment.
Exactly. And that's what behavioral risk management is all about. Recognizing those human factors and how we make decisions about risk.
Okay, so what are some of the ways our brains can kind of trip us up when it comes to managing risk?
Well, one of the big ones is confirmation bias. It's our tendency to look for information that supports what we already believe, even if what we believe is wrong.
So like, if we think a certain investment is a good idea,
Right.
we might only pay attention to good news and ignore any warning signs.
Exactly. Confirmation bias can lead us to make decisions based on what we want to be true, not on the facts.
Right.
And that can be really dangerous when you're dealing with risk because it can make you blind to potential threats.
Makes sense. So we need to be aware of that bias and make sure we're getting different perspectives, challenging our own assumptions.
Absolutely. Another common one is anchoring bias.
Okay.
That's our tendency to overemphasize the first piece of information we get, even if it's not relevant or accurate.
Oh, so like if I hear that a certain stock is supposed to go up, I might get fixated on that price
Uh,
and ignore anything that suggests it might actually go down.
exactly. Anchoring bias can lead you to make decisions based on old or incomplete information. And that's especially problematic when things are changing quickly, like in the stock market.
Got it. Okay, so those are two biases.
Yeah.
Are there any other, like, mental traps we should be aware of?
There's the availability heuristic.
The availability what?
Heuristic, it basically means we tend to overestimate the likelihood of things that we remember easily or that were really vivid experiences.
So, like, if my company just went through a big security breach,
Exactly.
I might be way more worried about cybersecurity risks, even if they're not that likely to happen again.
Exactly. The availability heuristic can make us super cautious in some areas while we're neglecting other risks that might be more important. It all comes down to understanding how our own experiences shape how we see things.
This is really eye-opening. It's like we're figuring out how our own brains can trick us.
Right.
So it's not just about managing risk out there in the world.
Yeah.
It's also about managing the risk inside our own heads.
Exactly. Behavioral risk management is all about recognizing the human element in all of this. It's about understanding how our own psychology can help us and hurt us when we're facing uncertainty.
This has been so interesting. I'm starting to see risk management in a whole new way.
Hmm.
It's not just about numbers and spreadsheets.
Yeah.
It's about understanding ourselves, our biases, how we see the world.
I agree. And by bringing this behavioral perspective into our risk management toolkit, we can become even better decision makers, leaders, innovators.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an amazing deep dive into risk management. We covered so much, from the basics to the complexities of strategic risk, how to turn threats into opportunities, and even this fascinating world of behavioral risk management.
It's been great exploring these concepts with you.
Likewise.
Mm.
And to our listeners, don't forget to visit www.LearnXYZ-In. They have tons of great articles, tools, and resources on risk management and all sorts of other topics.
They have a wealth of information to help you dive deeper and sharpen your skills.
Exactly. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more insightful explorations into the world of knowledge and ideas. We're always exploring new topics and bringing you the latest insights. Thanks for joining us.